Greetings Age of Mythology fans, I'm donHaize, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So, when I did my Age of Mythology Retold campaign walkthrough, I had quite a few comments on people asking me what my hotkey setups were and what hotkeys are important, which ones to ignore, because there are a lot of hotkeys in this game and quite frankly a lot of them are pretty useless. There are some very important ones, naturally, and there's some very unimportant ones. So I thought I would just share my 5 cents with you all and give you my own kind of overview, share what my hotkey setup is like and what hotkeys I think are important and which ones are not so important. So let's begin. So first things first, we're going to go to hotkeys. And one thing I really do appreciate with pretty much all Age of Mythology Retold, Remastered, and Definitive Edition games is that we have hotkey setups for and selection groups. So whether it's like selection groups, command groups, menu and interface, find units, is very nicely laid out, and I do appreciate that. So kudos to the devs for creating this. You can also create profiles, which is also very useful. If you can also search for specific hotkeys. If you're looking for, let's say, attack move, you can find them very quickly and easily, knowing that this is an important hotkey. So yeah, kudos. Some really nice quality of life hotkey management here, and with hotkey profiles, it's quite useful to have your own. I honestly just use the default and then just changed a few things as I was going along. But you know, different people, each their own. Different people are going to find setting up hotkeys a little bit different from one to another. Anywho, let's begin on what is quite an important hotkey group, and that is selection group. So this is essentially the main, what I would call the main hotkey of grouping up units, buildings, town centers, armories, all into some very easy control groups so that you can select what you want when you want without having to go back, find where did I place that building, where's those units gone. You can literally double click on one and then bang, it takes you to your army. So let's start with the actual creation of the control groups, because then everything else will make sense. Any RTS veteran will probably use this day in, day out, because these are like some of the most important hotkey setups you can have in any Age of or RTS title. Straight up, these are incredible. So the first thing you do is control and whatever number. Most people will use 1 to 0 because there's plenty of control groups. Now I tend to use 1 to 5 and then 0, and I'll tell you what I use for each of them. So control group 1 tends to be melee units, cavalry, melee myth units. Control group 2 tends to be archers or myth units, naval units, siege weapons, whatever's not 1. Sometimes you can like bundle all of your units into one control group and be happy with that. I like to have a little bit more control. I like to have my melee units go up and attack, whilst my control group 2 I can kite around, or yeah, you can have your team 2 do all the heavy lifting whilst team 1 kind of just rotates around the map. Generally you can have 3 and 4 as control groups for armies. I quite like to have control group 3 to be my military buildings. So stables, barracks, temples, archery ranges. And then I just hit tab to target or cycle between buildings. Didn't actually mean to click that. But yeah, tab basically can target or switch between or cycle between the types of buildings. So I can build all my barracks units, then I can hit tab, build all my archery units, hit tab again, build my stable units, etc. And then it just cycles back around. Control group 4 I tend to use for town centers. Control group 5 I tend to bring back into army, normally something that's going round or pincering an enemy. And then control group 0 I tend to use as armories or upgrade buildings. Honestly, this is just a StarCraft stroke Warcraft hotkey setup that I've used pretty much since I was a kid. I'm sure there are better ways of doing it, managing that, but it's just what I'm used to, what's familiar to me. And I think there's an important thing to know about hotkeys, and that is there's not necessarily a right or wrong way of doing something. If you do something enough, if you repeat those actions enough times, you'll get familiar with it. However, what is important is it has to work for you, and what works for me might not necessarily work for someone else. I'll also say if you want to find any units, you just grow you 1 to or select those units just 1 to 0, and then if you want to search for those units, you can just press Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 3. And finally, the last one that's useful is add to group. So if you've got group 1 somewhere off in the map, and then you're selecting a different army and you want to add that to group 1, you just shift 1. And when you select 1, it'll have all the units combined. It's a pretty useful one. I personally don't use add to group, but it is a useful hotkey and probably one worth memorizing. Remove for any group is actually quite useful when you've got a villager mixed in by mistake. It happens more often than I'd care to admit. When you select an entire army, you group it as control 1, and then you've got a villager in there, and it's just like, oh, really? You have to select the villager and then just hit U. He's gone from the group. Then when you reselect group 1, there's no villager trying to build armories when you're attack moving. Or actually ranges in my case. But yeah, it's, again, very useful. Make sure you're remembering these. This is a very powerful control group. Definitely one worth investing into. All right. On to probably the most important command in the entirety of RTS. I'm not just talking Age of Empires, I'm talking RTS as a genre. The old A move, coined from the world of Command and Conquer, StarCraft and Warcraft, where basically you attack move, aka the A move, because most people bind it to A, and rather than right clicking, which just commands the units you have selected to move to position A or B, attack move basically means anything they encounter along the way will be attacked. They'll retaliate if someone attacks them. There are very few reasons why you would want to just path to a location, unless you're trying to do it sneakily and not trying to alert the enemy to your presence. Otherwise, you'd almost always want to use attack move, because attack move, it's a safeguard for you just sending your army into a position, looking away, doing something on a macro level like building villages, upgrading stuff, looking back and your army's gone. You're like, where did that go? Oh, they were attacked and they didn't do anything. You just lost an army for the hell of it. So attack move, very important, guys. Make sure you're binding this. Doesn't have to be A, but A move is the most standard. I asked pretty much any pro player and they'll probably have attack move bound to A. It's just second nature for RTS veterans, I believe. Of all of these, I don't really see any benefit in using any of these. I've never used them. I like that there is an alternative to attack move, but I've never used it. These three are actually useful, and it's only useful to the Atlantean faction. Essentially, you turn normal units into military units, or hero units, I should say. So if you have all your military units selected, you can press H and it turns them all into heroes, so long as you've got the resources to do so. Same with citizens, and obviously convert to gate as well. I personally find them quite useful. The convert to gate, not so much, but then I don't tend to play the Atlantean faction all that much outside of the campaign. Eject garrison units is very useful. I put it to X because it's an easy keybind to remember. X, exit. That's the only reason. It's just stayed with me forever. And then garrison being Alt X. So this is the other kind of useful keybinds. Now, I will say it is quite easy in a lot of the more modern Age of Empires or Age of Mythology titles to garrison units. More often than not, you can just click on a town centre and then ring the bell, and all of your villagers will just run to whatever the nearest building is to garrison. So that is probably the easiest way. That's the way I do it. However, you might find that the auto pathing takes you straight into the path of an enemy, so you may want to manually like move them into a different direction and make them garrison something they wouldn't normally garrison. So Alt X is a useful hotkey to have just in case. And then eject X. So this works the same, I believe, with embarked units for like naval transports. You can press X and they'll unload essentially in the same way. Delete, very useful. Make sure you're doing this one. I'm actually surprised this isn't set to P. Patrol is actually quite a useful hotkey. I'm actually going to change that now because it's surprised I didn't have that already set. But patrol just means you're basically taking units and they'll go from where they are now to the patrol point and they'll just go back and forth. Anything that moves up to them, if they're on aggressive stance, they'll attack basically. So it's, rather than just have them in one position, it's an area that people can abuse. People will just, you know, walk around the area they're slapped and outside of their pathing, I guess, or outside of their sphere of influence. Walk around your army and then attack you when you're not looking. Patrol just allows you to make that a little bit more challenging from your opponent. And then delete units, hella useful. This is, especially in games like this where you need population control. If I've got too many villagers, I need to be able to free up supply. I've got a load of weak units that I want to replace with some fresh health ones. Use delete. It's a very useful hotkey. Please use it. It will save you a lot of effort, I'm sure, down the road. Moving on to general gameplay hotkeys. Cast God Powers F1 to F5. I mean, I'd never use this if I'm being honest. It doesn't really save you much time. Doesn't really help you in any way. But it might save you a couple of seconds. Especially if you're trying to juggle lots of things and you just want to... Right, I know I need to cast this God Power. F1, click where you need to go. It's useful. I tend not to use it. I tend to just click, but it has its benefits. Auto queue and cancel auto queue. Honestly, you can just hit right click on your mouse. I find it works so much better. I can see the benefit in getting these, but I wouldn't waste your time with them. Right click, auto queues. Right click stops auto queues. It's simple as that. There's less things to have to remember, the better. Flare minimap is useful if you are in a team game with human players. Doesn't help if you're with AI. But Alt F, nice easy. Alt flare. And you can literally just flare up the map so that your allies can know where you're going to attack. And it has its uses. I'm not much one for skirmishing or PvP, but it's a useful thing to have. Probably worth grabbing. You can also have an enter flare mode, but I'm pretty sure there's a button you can click on the somewhere around the map that auto targets this anyway, auto triggers this, so probably an easy way to do it. This very, very useful. Make sure you've got this selected. Doesn't have to be tab. Tab is just so easy to remember. Basically, you want to cycle between units. If you've got an army selected and you want to select your archers, or you want to select your hero unit to cast an ability, press tab. You might have to press it a few times, but you'll get there in the end. Same with buildings. If you've got a bunch of buildings, military buildings selected, and you want to tab between the types of units you can create, you can do it on the fly by pressing tab whilst you're in the middle of a battle, and you can refill the ranks whilst you're doing the battle. What I see a lot of players doing, this isn't a criticism, this is just an oversight, or it's like an observation, if you will. I see a lot of people take a fight, they lose the fight, and then they go to build units, by which point there's like a 2-minute window before you start getting an army again. what I tend to do, and this is just something I've built up over the years, when you're fighting, build your army. Because once the fight is over, you'll have an army ready to rock and roll. Whether that be for defense, whether that's to just go straight back on the counter-offensive, you have to do this. This is a veteran RTS move. Please do it. It will save yourself a lot of battles and lots of wins. Menu and interface. There's not a lot to go over on this one, really. Deselect, hide game menu, escape. It's very much, this is a standard. Escape is just the easiest thing to do. It's a top left. You just click and it cancels whatever you've got selected. Very useful. Quick save, quick load. I very rarely use it. Toggle score display, very useful, but you're probably only going to display it once and then you'll never do it again. Same with toggle game time. I find it very useful to have game time enabled, especially in campaign missions, because a lot of RTS is based on timing. So rather than trying to memorize when am I going to get attacked, if you see, you'll probably find timings where people call it timing windows. Once the time clock hits 5 minutes, you generally, like, a rush into a certain build will approach at that time. In the campaign, it might be a trigger, such as the enemy attacks you at 5 minutes, 8 minutes, and 11 minutes. It's a trigger because it's built into the game. Having your game time on and displayed is so useful. I highly recommend it for those of you who haven't. Having something set to a obscure key is ideal because you're never gonna... Once you've toggled it, you don't have to re-toggle it again. It will remember the setting. So it's a one and done. Hit a F11 and then never have to worry about it again unless you want to turn it off for whatever reason. Everything else on this list, I don't think is worth bothering with. I've never used this in all my days, all my years of playing RTS. Quite frankly, if you're going to auto-select or auto-build or auto-cast, just right-click. And if you want to cancel, right-click again. It's that simple. Moving on. Find and select units. This is actually quite useful. This is something you should probably utilize a lot more. Probably something I should utilize a lot more. But select all land and navy military units on screen. Shift space. Quite useful. I think this is a personal keybind. I don't think this is default. It is useful. Find idle villager. I probably should have something set to that because that is quite good. The villager group. If there's a group of... I think this is why I didn't do villager because it only selects one. Whereas if you've got a group of villagers, i.e. 4 villagers all stood together and they're all idle, when you hit dot, it will take you to them. It will select all 4 of them so you don't have to keep doing each one individually. So I think this is the way to go. And if there's only one of them, it'll only select one of them. So it basically just a better version of this. And then select all idle villagers, shift dot. I just do it because it's just... You can bind it to whatever. I probably would be quite memorable. I for idle. Probably if I, in hindsight, I probably should use I, but you can use whatever. I think the most obvious, most relevant thing here is use something that you're going to remember. It's not about what I remember, it's about what you will. If you think idle villagers I is memorable, use that. If you think dot's useful, use that. If you think enter's useful or shift, whatever, you use whatever is relevant to yourselves. But this is a hotkey you definitely want to bind. Find all idle villagers. Actually, these are probably better. Oh, these are alt versions. Okay, so there's multiple ways to do that. Find all idle fishing groups, quite useful. All idle military, that's a good one. All land military, heroes. These are all good. All myth units. I mean, these are all worthwhile putting a binding to something. Find pharaoh. This is actually one I probably should use a lot more because I'm forever losing my pharaoh, especially when I'm trying to find the god power to upgrade them to the son of Osiris. I'm like, where the hell did my pharaoh go? So yeah, this is actually quite a good hotkey, probably worthwhile utilizing. Find buildings. Now this one is a beauty. So there's two different ways of doing it. You can do all buildings on screen, which I think is limiting, which is why I don't use it. Find all production buildings, no matter where they are on the map. Control space. This is a personal keybind. Space is generally considered as a find something. What, like, take me to the most recent event that happened. For me, control space is such an easy key press, and I can just select all my military buildings. I don't have to bind them to 3. That frees up my 3 hotkey to actually put different units or different control groups, and frees up that hotkey. And then find all town centers. Oh my god, this is the best, the absolute best. I am forever like trying to forgetting to build workers. This was before I found out auto queue was a thing, but using space just means you can go straight to all town centers, and then you press your Q key, and then you've got villagers constantly building. It's very useful. It's also the first thing I do when I load up into a game. Hit space, especially if you've got multiple town centers. You want to hit the ground running when you start a game. Hit space, you've got all your town centers all grouped up, then you can also queue all of them at once. Very useful. I've not really used these. They are pretty useful, but I have never used them personally. I can see how they would be useful though if you want to find us all towers, all fortresses. They definitely have their place. And then these are honestly all just these are all default. I've not changed any of these from this point on. However, in hindsight, I would say it probably would be beneficial to have things like build granary as G, build house as H, build temple as T, build dock as D, build archery range as A, academy probably M, stable S, farm F makes sense, market probably should be an M instead of a G. Are you going to remember? The thing is, are you going to remember the armory set to H? Maybe. If it was set to A, it'd be easier. Y maybe. This is honestly going to come down to personal preference. It's just a case of remembering what you've set them to, and I think alphabetically is quite an easy way to remember what you've set to what. And then beyond this, everything is default. I'm just looking if there's anything at all that I have set differently. No, is the answer. All of these are completely default. There may be some little wins and little nuggets in here, but honestly, I think these are all worth keeping as default, unless there's something in particular you want to do. I like the auto train Toxitaes as Alt Q. Again, you can just right click on the Toxitaes and it will auto train them. It's going to come down to preference at the end of the day. If you find it easier to use a hotkey to auto train, use that. If you find it easier to right click to auto train, use that. It's going to come down to each person being individual. But yeah, that's pretty much all of the hotkeys that I've selected, I've changed or have edited in any way, shape or form. All the others, as I said, are very much the legacy defaults. I don't have my own profile for it. Although I will say it probably is worth having your own profile and having a default as well. If you do mess anything up, you can always default all. You can always default individual keys. But what I personally found is playing the game a couple of times, you'll start to realize certain things like, oh, that doesn't quite work for me. Like this is not easy to remember, so I'm pressing the wrong thing. If you are finding that, change it. It's probably a trial and error, and then over time you'll probably end up with a setup that works for you. And it is really important to reiterate, there is no right and wrong way to set up hotkeys. It is personal preference for sure, but I do think the sort of keys that I've highlighted in this video are definitely the important ones. Everything else up over and above that is kind of personal preference. Now that pretty much does it for the hotkey side of things. However, there's one thing. I haven't really played Age of Mythology Retold since I did the campaign and the Titan battles or mythical battles. However, I noticed there's this little Arena of the Gods thing. This is quite cool. So, yeah, there's a pretty cool little thing that I've not even played yet. So, we'll be doing everything on extreme when we do finally get here. But if this is something that interests you guys, then I will definitely be covering this. There is obviously the Age of Empires Chronicles Battle for Greece, which is coming out tomorrow as of time of recording, or today as of time of uploading. But that will be covered first. But once we've done that, I am probably going to be covering this on extreme difficulty, because this looks really quite fun and quite cool. But yeah, anyway, I thought I'd just raise that as being something that I'm definitely interested in covering on this channel. Do let me know in the comment section below if that's something you're interested in as well. But yeah, that'll right about do it for this slightly shorter video. I say shorter video, it's actually quite long. It's been half an hour, but yeah, that'll right about do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you found it useful, please do give it a thumbs up. If this is the kind of content you enjoy, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. It does help support the channel, be greatly appreciated. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. It'd be great to see what your hotkey setups look like and how they differ to mine. My hotkey setup is by no means a definitive list. It is purely what I have been used to. Whether that's through this game or other games in the past, is purely what my preference is. However, some of these I've not even touched or looked at, and quite frankly, I'm sure there probably are some improvements I could make to my own hotkey setup, if being quite frank with you all. But yeah, that'll right about do it for this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I shall see you in the next video.